Vasey. I'm the Senior Technology Manager for Panasonic TVs in the UK. I'd like to point out that I wasn't fully responsible for this. I did have some help. What I'd like to do is give you an introduction of our different TVs. So we've basically called the phrase voice guidance as a feature which is incorporated in these TVs. It's a free feature that comes as standard, so there's no extra hardware or software downloads necessary to make this work. And this is introduced into the majority of our 2012 TVs, which are obviously currently in the market. So the first question really is sort of why introduce voice guidance as a standard feature? Well, so one of Panasonic's basic management objectives is to sort of enhance quality of life through the products that we develop. And one of our company principles is to contribute towards society. Really what we're looking to try and achieve is universal design, ideas for life. And certainly by improving accessibility, that's one way that we can achieve this. Panasonic has been very aware of accessibility, and certainly we've looked to try and increase our accessibility in our products as much as possible. We were one of the first adopters of audio description in our freeview TVs in the UK in 2005, and we were the first adopter of audio description for our FreeSat TVs from launch in 2008. So adding a text-to-speech or a voice guidance feature that allows the product to talk to a user really for us further improves accessibility for all users. So a little bit about the roadmap of how we've got here. So we first introduced voice guidance as a feature in 2010, but this was only for our Japanese models, so for TVs and Blu-rays, so obviously it only spoke Japanese. We then very quickly looked at how we could expand this to other markets. The UK was a key market for us, and also because of the support and the discussions we had initially with the RLSB. So in 2011 we started to collaborate much more with the RLSB and look at basically how we could introduce this feature and the requirements we were behind it. And in 2012, in the spring of this year, we launched a lineup of over 30 TVs in the UK market, all supporting this feature standard. These include LCD TVs and also plasma TVs as well. And the story doesn't stop there, so we'll continue to develop this functionality within our future models. So in 2013, we'll be looking to expand the coverage of the features in the TV that support voice guidance, but we'll also be looking to expand to other territories. So we're looking to introduce more language coverage, so for European markets, and also, for example, within Asia, we'll include Chinese as well. Very pleased to say that in July this year, we were given the Inclusive Design Awards by the RLSB, which we were very proud to receive. So some of the challenges that faced us. So the cost of the free feature. Obviously, this does cost money, so there are a number of costs behind this. The technology is a software technology which is licensed by a third party, so of course there's a licensing cost here. There's obviously development costs as well, so integration of that technology into our product, and of course testing and approval to make sure the functionality works and is fit for purpose. And there's also a royalty as well, so every TV which is sold is a small royalty for this technology. But this is on a falling scale, so the bigger the quantity of products, the lower the cost. So first of all, we didn't want to introduce a specialist product. We wanted this to be a standard feature across our product lineup. But also, if we developed a specialist product, it means that the quantities are relatively small, because it is still for C manufacturer really a minority market. If we only developed a specialist product, we really would have to pass the costs on to the customer in some way, and we really didn't want to do that. So basically the only solution was to introduce this as a standard feature, and through economies of scale we were then able to basically absorb all the costs from development, the royalties, the licensing, and pass nothing on to the customer. There was then the issue of marketing this as well. So initially our marketing team was somewhat skeptical, how do we market this? So it is for a relatively minority market. We didn't want to look at it as a specialist product, but at the same time we didn't want to ignore the feature either. Also, if we felt that if we marketed it too heavily, there might be some feeling from sighted users that even though we were saying it's free, that they may feel that they're paying for something that they weren't necessarily going to use. But also then how do we make sure that the users who would benefit most from this obviously were made aware of it. So there was really a balance to be taken here, and there's an enormous amount of support from the RLSB in actually promoting this kind of feature and this product as well. So the promotion of this feature, so of course Panasonic did promote it, and here what we can see is a point-of-sale poster. So as well as promoting all the other features within the TV, we also have quite a light promotion for voice guidance, which clearly announces screen menus, channel names, and TV program names. But we also made sure that when we went through magazine and online reviews, it made it clear that this feature was available, and that also that this was mentioned within the reviews as well. The RLSB put together a terrific awareness campaign, and they were obviously then able to target users who would really benefit from this kind of functionality through their normal media distribution routes, but also by being interviewed. In particular, there was one interview for the In Touch program on BBC Radio 4, which was very good, and also through their social media. They also created a number of instructional videos which are now on YouTube. I think believe it if you Google Panasonic Talking TV, you'll come up with some of the links. And in one of them in particular, this video was very welcoming. So going back to the RLSB, fantastic collaboration with the RLSB to really look at what was necessary for this kind of product. Initially, we started out by looking at the digital TV group's usability white papers for text-to-speech. And even though this was not a mandatory requirement, it gave us really a basis of what we felt was necessary for this product. And interestingly, this is now to become the basis for the IEC's international standard for text-to-speech. So we then looked and worked with the RLSB to scope basically what were the key requirements. So even though Panasonic is a very large organisation, of course we have very tight deadlines. And we also have limited development resources as well. So we really had to look at what was feasible, what we could do within the timescale. So it was to identify the must-haves against the nice-to-haves. Once we developed an initial prototype software, we then provided the RLSB with an early model of the TV. They then did internal evaluation of the product, but what was great for us was that they brought together a group of volunteers who were blind and partially sighted who could actually use the product, play with the product, and we were lucky enough to be able to join some of those sessions. And through the use of the product with these individuals, we were able really to understand what worked, what didn't work, what we needed to improve, and so on and so forth. At the end of all of this, the RLSB provided us with a very detailed recommendations report, of which we then tried to introduce as many of these recommendations into the product as possible. And actually, a lot of the recommendations that we weren't able to introduce because of timescale issues, we will then be introducing for our future model lineup. So I've talked quite a lot about the actual product and particularly the process that we went through. Unfortunately, I don't have a TV here to demonstrate, but what I have done is I've identified some of the key areas where we felt voice guidance offered most benefit within our products. The first one is menu navigation. So of course, menus are navigated using what we call a 5-point remote control, so up, down, left, right, and OK. Of course, the menu is displayed on the screen and it has a lot of options and features in there. So if I can, hopefully this will play what our voice guidance would present to the user as soon as this menu was launched.
Option menu. There are 6 items available. Use up or down keys to select item. Press exit to leave and return to TV. Item selected is voice guidance settings. Press OK to access options.
So another area is content discovery. So of course, you turn on your TV and you want to know what's on. So on our TVs, when you change channel, you're presented with a channel banner, which you can see here in the middle of the screen. And what this shows is basically the program position, the program name, event name, and in this case also a synopsis of the actual event that is currently available.
Homes under hammer, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, program type, lifestyle. Martin Roberts and Lucy Alexander visit a period house in Exeter and a house in Kent, and we visit a plot of land in Cheshire 2 years after it went to auction. Then BBC News, weather, subtitles.
And finally, we really looked at things like complex features. So what we recognised was that voice guidance would not only benefit visually impaired users, but actually users who were not so tech savvy, were not so familiar with these kind of products. And in particular, features such as electronic program guide, These tend to be very cluttered menus with a lot of information within a grid, but also with a lot of functionality in there. So what we tried to do was not only explain to the user where they were within the menu, but also actually how to navigate and how to use the menu as well.
TV Guide, today, 1, BBC 1 Wales, Neighbourhood News 9:15 to 10 o'clock, press OK to select, use left or right to select programme, use up or down to select channel, press green to advance 24 hours or red for previous 24 hours. Future programmes will be added to the timer programming list, current programmes will provide an option to view. Press yellow to list current programmes by genre, press blue to list channels by category, press exit to leave, and return to TV.
There's a lot of information there, so what we decided was to also implement a function which would provide different levels of verbosity. So this is in beginner mode, but once the customer is used to navigating this menu, they would then switch the voice guidance into expert mode, which would simply provide them with an explanation of where they were in the menu rather than all of the preamble of how to use the menu. So really, in summary, what we wanted to do as Panasonic was we wanted to introduce a product for everybody, really looking at universal design. We didn't want to have a specialist product. And we were able to make sure that none of this cost was passed on to the customer by spreading the costs across the product lineup as well. And on top of that, we had a huge amount of support from the RLSB in ways that really, I think Panasonic would have struggled to make sure that the product was made aware to those customers who would most benefit from it.
Thank you very much. Do you agree with me that the RIBA and the Architectural Registration Board, who govern the conduct of architects in this country, should introduce a requirement that architects must study inclusive design to a good academic standard and must demonstrate that they've got some practical experience of inclusive design before they're allowed to practice? If they don't do it, they're not.
I think there is obviously, I think within both the registration, the architecture registration and the RIBA, both have a CPD sort of requirements. So basically, continuous professional development means that architects have to continue to learn best practice, and it is that is also from time to time fine-tuned to select topics, but this is definitely topics which are of use and where architects will need to learn from others. Not everybody has perhaps the privilege, and a lot of students obviously don't get there so quickly to build their own building. So to have done it before is perhaps setting a barrier, which maybe one too many, but one certainly needs to understand it. And I think the topic is definitely on the agenda, and together with sustainability, which is actually a different issue, but still one has to think about the wider impact that buildings have. And I think this is, I'm not going to be general about it, but this is where things are heading for. And the regulation is a minimum backstop, as I said. So everybody obviously has to cross that hurdle if they want to build in this country. We have the advantage that we're also building abroad, where sometimes these regulations don't apply, but obviously nothing stops you being doing better than the minimum, as long as your clients or the users appreciate that investment in buildings. And sometimes it doesn't cost much more, it is just a better way of doing things. I think it is obviously those who have direct or indirect experience of these issues will do it better. And I think one thing which is probably for all professions, you done it once, the next time you know you can do better. And that I think is, well, both ARB and RBA I think are pushing that. There is obviously design is per definition finding a good way with a lot of, if you like, conflicting or making the best of all these requirements within a budget, within a time frame. And that is really the skill that there is. But I think to reassure you, I think the accessibility is definitely on the agenda. I think it is, I can't guarantee that, but I think it probably is on the curriculum of a lot of the architectural education. So it is being, if you like, hardwired into the architectural profession.
I've got a question for Mark. Is your voice actually adjustable in terms of levels? Does the TV volume go down while the voice is playing, or do you have two concurrent sounds? And secondly, is it configurable in terms of speed to speech, and can you have a male voice instead of a female voice? I do understand the gentleman who does the lottery is got his voice in every region on the market at the moment. I think it's all down. So I'd be interested to know if that's possible or not.
The first question was related to the audio itself. So what we decided was the best user experience was that when the voice guidance voice was speaking, so we moved the volume from the TV, otherwise there was just too much going on at the same time. If you also consider as well that the product supports audio description, so you could potentially have main audio description and voice guidance. So because of all of those different competing audios, we felt it was best that when the voice guidance spoke, everything else was quiet. Your next question was based on speed. So the speed that you heard was normal speed, and also fast mode as well, which I found was actually very, very fast. But when we went through the testing with the blind and partially volunteers, actually a lot of them through the fast speech, which I found fascinating. For the next year's product as well, we're actually going to increase or rather add additional modes. Unfortunately, there's only one voice. We decided that the best voice was the female voice. And then actually, this was mainly due to the bass baritone and the male voice within the product and speakers. But yes, there are other voices available, but at the moment we focused on only one voice. But as I say, there are different speeds. You can increase, decrease the volume, and you can also change the verbosity levels as well, what is said.
I just wondered, many times I've written to other sort of mainstream technology companies about accessibility in the past few years to ask how they can improve their products. This is obviously something that you've done. Quite often the response that I've had back is it will cost us money and we can't afford to do that. You've obviously been able to absorb a lot of the costs involved in this development. Do you expect to receive any form of monetary return on the accessibility investment? And what would you say to any other companies who might sort of come to you and ask how you've got on in the past working with maybe getting down a similar road?
It's a very good question, and certainly it's one we really looked at in detail. Obviously, we are a CVC manufacturer, we want to cover our costs. I think, as I mentioned, we very quickly realised that if we were to make a specialist product, it would be incredibly difficult for us to absorb those costs. What we were able to do was obviously through economies of scale and getting the functionality into as many TVs as possible, we were able to cover to spread those costs out, particularly with the royalty as well. This is on a falling scale, so that the greater the quantity, the smaller the royalty. But also because we have a roadmap to develop the products not only this year but next year and in the future, this was all then taken into account. With regards to a monetary return, it's very difficult to say, to be honest. I think certainly what it does do is it hopefully shows the buying public of Panasonic obviously has accessibility very much in mind. That we're trying to develop products which are universally available for all the customer base. If we were to be asked by another developer or manufacturer how to proceed, again, I think really it's sort of case by case, and then it really depends upon how they're looking and willing to develop and integrate this kind of functionality to make it a standard and core rather than looking at sort of a specialist market.
I'd like to ask the panel a question. I know Jonathan will answer that potentially in greater depth than we're able to. But how does imposing more challenging constraints at the beginning of the design process actually lead to better products?
So there were two things that I wanted to note on that particular subject. I have a couple of categories of products that I always like to think of. One is inclusive products, and the other one, as you can see up on the screen, is what I term beyond inclusive products. Inclusive products are products that you design for everybody. The idea is that you are designing them for the greatest majority of people. And so the question is, that obviously makes it harder. It makes it a real challenge. There are a lot of educators out there. How do you do that? So the first thing I would say on that is that my understanding of innovation is that challenges are good. I'll give you an example of this. There was there was a thing called fixation. So if you were the product manager of a product and you're trying to do a new version of that product, what you do is you get your best people into a room and you go through an ideation process. And in general, what people who do this find is that everyone all over the world, including all of your competitors, comes up with the same 7 product ideas. Basically, you just can't get out of your fixation with what already exists. So you kind of make one step in each direction, but you don't really get anywhere. And this is a real problem that people encounter. And I did some work with Siemens Bosch. They create a lot of white goods, fridges, that sort of thing. And we were looking at ovens. And I said, well, how about this for a way of getting past fixation? Let's take a real interesting challenge. So you're doing an oven, and I want you to come up with an oven that will support the needs of someone who's older, who can't actually physically hold up anymore the thing they're trying to put into the oven, the casserole dish or whatever. And suddenly they're in a completely different space in terms of their imagination. And what we came up with pretty quickly, after about 10 minutes, was the idea of an oven that was actually in your work surface. You press the button, and the oven came up out of the work surface until the shelf that you're putting things into was at the right level. And you literally just pushed it from the work surface onto it. You then pressed the button, the oven went down until everything was cooked, in which case it came back up again, and you were able to slide it out. Now that's one example of what they regarded as being one of the most innovative ideas they'd ever had for what to do next with an oven. So that's how you take challenges, if you like, from a wider community and make better products for everyone. The second example I wanted to give was beyond inclusion. So beyond inclusion is my term for the sorts of products that Damon was talking about earlier. So assistive technologies, all of that sort of thing. Products that are created specifically for someone with a particular need. So they're not inclusively designed. The great thing is, though, about them, that because you were doing something which is very, very specific and precise to someone's need, they tend to be innovative. They tend to be incredibly different from the sorts of products that are there on the market. That's great, but you can't sell it to that many people. If you like, the good news is that some of the products that you use, that we all use, actually came down that route. So here's 2 examples. At the top of the slide there, you have someone writing, I think it was sometime in the 18th century, that was the problem. We had a blind person who, how are they going to write? And that was the genesis of the idea for the first working typewriter. So the first working typewriter we know was created in Italy by one guy for a countess who was blind. And he created it for her to make sure that she could communicate. And obviously that product was created for someone who's blind, but now it's beyond, it's part of everything that we use. Here's my iPad, and there it is, the keyboard on there. Bringing it more up to date, what we've got at the bottom of the slide there is a challenge that I was set around about 2005. So I was trying to create games for blind kids to help them learn math skills. And So what I was trying to do was to do games that are purely through your ears. Again, very, very different, very unusual, completely worked. We created a game called Sauce of the Big Maths Adventure that really did allow people who were blind to learn maths purely through what they did with the keyboard and through their ears. On the right, we have something called Zombies Run. Has anyone played Zombies Run? Yeah, okay. So it's cool. This is the thing. I mean, you're sitting there thinking, well, why on earth would anybody in the mainstream want a product that is all about what you can hear? Well, you know what? Everybody is blind when they're jogging. Because if you're looking at a screen and you're jogging, you're not jogging for that much longer, you're actually bumping into something before you know that. So you don't want to be looking at a screen. So how do you make jogging interesting? Well, these guys came up with the idea that you're being chased by zombies. How about that for motivation for you? But obviously they wanted to make sure that that experience, that narrative experience of being chased by zombies was available to you when you were jogging. So they couldn't put kind of like zombies on the screen. So they did what anyone does. They kind of thought of what generally do you do when you're jogging, which is have your earbuds in your ears. And they thought, okay, let's do this like sound. So effectively, your output is sound going into your ears. If you're not running fast enough, they're getting close, and you might get eaten. And your input is what you're doing with your body, where you are in terms of your GPS. That's one example of somebody taking something that came out of the blind audio games community and saying, you know what, that is the solution to the mainstream need. And fundamentally, it was so innovative that lots of people love it. So just a couple of examples of the sorts of things, sorts of innovation that can happen when you actually think creatively about the different needs that we have.
Thank you. Paul, how does having a tougher brief improve a building?
Well, I think clients who know what they want, and you can have a dialogue with, yes, it can be more difficult, but you're certainly more targeted with what you're heading for, and obviously getting feedback. If one is not a specialist of every type of building we design, so it is important to listen to people. And quite often, sometimes people can only think about what they already have with a different color or slightly bigger. Quite often one needs to think about what the potential is now, right? If your last house was built 50 years ago, what can be done today is more. So it is a dialogue, and you need to say, you can do this, or wouldn't it be better to do so? And it is obviously the challenge is to communicate in these very abstract areas, because the investment obviously of a building is long. We obviously need a world of visualization of what interiors look like. Technology has moved along fast, and before that there were models, etc. So it is about communication, but it starts off with vision, and vision is something also about challenging ideas, if you like. And there are a lot of reasons why you can't do things, but what you can do is open-ended, if you like, and say in the world of architecture, you specify and you rely on products being available. And that is an ongoing flow of things. This year it may be lifts, tomorrow it may be assisted toilets or whatever. So I think nothing is standing still, and I think we are in an age where technology and electronic technology is just getting leaps about, and it's also getting cheaper. But the big thing that I would say is that from a building perspective, which is a long-term perspective, you wouldn't want to make it so that, because technology changes so fast that it is outdated, or a building becomes, instead of being inclusive, it becomes exclusive, and those without the battery power or the gizmo on them are at a disadvantage. I would like to think that the building has whatever you need to receive its guests, if you like. But obviously, it will be very good if people have, people would have had a camera in the past, and now they have a mobile. But it is, I think if we've seen how fast it has changed, I think it will change as much again, even 10 or 20 years' time. So therefore it has to be a post-fit item, and there has to be consensus from the user's point of view as to what format you put in.
Mark, how did the designers at Panasonic respond to these kinds of new constraints?
So when we started to look at the product which is currently in the market, it was very much a case of how do we include this kind of technology, and how do we make it, which areas of the product do we believe by adding this technology to it will provide most benefit. And as I mentioned, we looked at menu navigation and complex functionality, but also, of course, the discovery of content. And certainly now that we've gone through that first iteration, it's really sort of brought to the forefront, to be honest, how complex these products can be. And if you look at any TV on the market, and you go into the menu system, when these quite complex nested menus, it's very difficult to understand where you are. And then, of course, you've got the issue of the input device as well. So certainly it has made us rethink the way we've developed products in the past, whereas we've mainly developed for sighted audience. And now it is very much a case of, okay, well, how do we make this business more intuitive and easy to use, not only for visually impaired user, but also just generally for any user who is less familiar with this kind of technology.
Has the experience triggered other design changes in other parts of Panasonic?
Difficult for me to say, because obviously my main focus is sort of TV, but certainly the other CE products within our sort of AV lineup, because of the Blu-ray, is one good example. Yes, that's beginning to be fair to that as well. And really looking at, say, things like input devices. So at the moment we still have this fork-with remote control, which actually is, I think, still one of the easiest ways to navigate a matrix-style menu. But of course, there are other things which are available, companion devices such as tablets and smartphones, pointer devices, gesture devices, and so on and so forth. So it's really beginning to look at how this technology, which is really becoming mainstream, can be incorporated into the product with relatively little cost. Really just looking at how better to design the product.